Order, please. Before we begin the day routine, I'd like to bring to the attention of the members some very special guests that are here in the House with us today in the East Gallery. We have 38 grade 8 students from the Parrsville Regional High School in Parrsville, Cumberland County. And they're from the beautiful constituency of Cumberland South. With them, we have the teachers Jennifer Legier, April Allen, and Eleanor White, and as well chaperone Pastor Greg Doyle, who have come to Halifax today to have an opportunity to watch the proceedings in the House and to our province house in Halifax. They've also had an opportunity to meet some of the members of the legislature, including the Minister of Education. They had some good questions for me of the Minister, and I know he received very well. And so I'd ask all our visitors from Cumberland County, from Parrsville, to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House, please. Thank you very much. I certainly hope our guests enjoy the proceedings today. Thank you. Begin the day routine, presenting reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Sorry, the honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition with regards to autism in Nova Scotia. And the operative clause of the petition is, we believe that the provincial government ought to provide access to publicly funded speech and behavioral therapy both before and during the child's school years in all autism children in Nova Scotia. There are approximately 225 names on the petition, and I have affixed my name to it as well.
This is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Table reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today to present the January 2004, the annual report of the Nova Scotia Teachers College Foundation.
Report is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table an updated Public Health Administration chart to replace the chart on page 13 of the 2004-2005 budget address, and also the table order in Council number 20413 dated January 23 regarding additional appropriations for the fiscal year March 31st, 2003.
Documents are tabled. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the operation of this House would not run smoothly without the help of the many staff of the House of Assembly, including Mike Laffin and Peter Theriault, who oversee its operation, their staff of pages and messengers, not to mention the very able commissionaires of this House, Chef Charlie, and our maintenance personnel, and whereas we salute also the very able staff of the Legislative Library, led by Margaret Murphy and Sandy Cook, including staff of the committee's office, and note that every word of the House's proceedings become a part of history thanks to the tireless Hansard staff, led by Robert Kinsman and the technical wizards at Legislative TV. And whereas staff to be thanked also include our knowledgeable clerks under the direction of Rod MacArthur, and staff and Legislative Council under the leadership of Gordon Hebb, as well as our ever-present Sergeant-at-Arms. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House rise and applaud our talented, hard-working staff of the Nova Scotia Legislature and commend each of them for their superb efforts on our behalf during the 2004 spring session. And I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Thank you. We certainly appreciate all the hard work and effort on behalf of the staff, the pages, and the staff of Province House. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to read this resolution on behalf of the Minister responsible for the Advisory Council on the Status of Women. Whereas Techsploration is a province-wide program that introduces grade 9 girls to occupations in trades, technology, and science by allowing them to meet and learn from female mentors in the industry, and whereas the program expands the students' range of career choices, improving their chances of building more financially secure futures for themselves, and whereas the movement of women in trades, technology, and science strengthens these fields by diversifying their workforce and strengthens Nova Scotia's competitiveness by introducing fresh perspectives to these industries. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate the students, mentors, and sponsors of Techsploration on a bigger and better year of bringing girls in science, trades, and technology together. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the farm gate production value for the aquaculture sector in Nova Scotia has increased by 30% in 2003 to $40 million. And whereas direct aquaculture farm employment has increased by 138 jobs during the past year. And whereas aquaculture represents an excellent development opportunity in coastal and rural Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate the aquaculture sector and encourage further development of aquaculture in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, before I give notice of this resolution, I would like to draw to the attention of members in your gallery the presence of the members of the Blue Nose International Marathon Organizing Committee. And they are with us today. There's Gerald Walsh, who is the co-chair, Rod McCullough, co-chair, Craig Sherritt, Sarah Young, Neil McCullough, Susan Newhook, Brad Smith, John Sale Miguel, Rob Atkinson, and Chris Larson. Mr. Speaker, I trust they're in the gallery. I can't see, but I would ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House. Mr. Speaker, I present this resolution on behalf of the Honourable Minister of Health Promotion. Whereas the inaugural Blue Nose International Marathon is set to run this weekend in Halifax with over 3,000 participants, including runners from across Nova Scotia, every province in Canada, and over 10 U.S. states. In addition to over 700 volunteers and thousands expected to line the race route. And whereas the marathon weekend is designed to be the People's Marathon, with the diversity to encourage and challenge runners of all levels, young and old, first-timers, and seasoned marathoners. And whereas the marathon and its race route are designed to showcase the beauty of our city and our province, with a course that showcases this great historic port. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislature recognize the significant contributions made by the volunteers and the community and the efforts of everyone involved to promote healthy living in staging this significant inaugural event, and wish them continued success and good running this weekend. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am also reading this resolution on behalf of my colleague, the Minister of Health Promotion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas increased physical activity and healthy eating are important to living a healthy lifestyle, and whereas the town of Lunenburg is striving to improve the health of its citizens to dispel recent newspaper reports about the health of South Shore residents, and whereas the town of Lunenburg has created a recreation fund which will support physical activity within the town and has instituted the Community Wellness Initiative which promotes healthy eating and exercise at seminars. Therefore, be resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate the town of Lunenburg for recognizing the importance of improved health for citizens and taking action by implementing programs to improve the health of its residents. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction to bills. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a bill, an act, to promote the taking of a photograph with a camera phone in a prohibited place.
Order, please. The honourable member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Prohibit the Taking of a Photograph with a Camera Phone in a Prohibited Place.
Give these to the other parties. Bill 86 entitled An Act to Prohibit the Taking of a Photograph with a Camera Phone in a Prohibited Place.
Order this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Tony Randall, an actor who achieved stardom on stage, television, and silver screen, passed away on Tuesday, May 18th at age 84. And whereas in his 60-year career, Tony Randall demonstrated his commitment to the art of acting, no more so than when he contributed $1 million to establish the National Actors Theatre. And whereas Nova Scotians owe a particular debt of gratitude to Tony Randall, who ensured the survival and success of Neptune Theatre, our foremost professional theatre, by becoming a loyal friend and a fundraiser. Therefore, be it resolved that this House expresses its most sincere condolences to the family of the late Tony Randall and its appreciation for the gifts he shared with the world. And, Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today, Thursday, May 21, 2004, Senator Al Graham will retire from the Senate of Canada. Whereas Senator Al Graham has been representing the people of his country, his province, and his native Cape Breton with dignity and distinction for 40 years. Whereas his colleagues in Ottawa will miss his wise and quiet counsel, and his family will enjoy more of his time and close presence. Therefore, be it resolved that all of us who are fortunate enough to be involved in public service endeavor to follow his example and live by words he often spoke. Be something, do something, help someone, and trust in God. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this year marks the 100th anniversary of the Stellarton Amateur Athletic Association, and whereas on July the 22nd...
Order, please. The Honourable the Premier.
On July the 22nd, festivities will be held on the Albion Field, including mini ball games, a senior ball game, and of course, food and other fun. And whereas the association, composed then and now of members from all over Pictou County, will be officially honored for work, as will be former players who made a significant impact in the sport of baseball in Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate the Stellarton Amateur Athletic Association for a century of excellence in the promotion of healthy activity and excellence in the sport of baseball, and wish the association many more years of success at the Albion Field in Stellarton. I ask for waiver.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Say that the Albion Field has been continuously a ball field for 100 years.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas an integral part of the workers' compensation system is the injured workers associations that exist throughout this province. And whereas these groups work tirelessly on behalf of injured workers from one end of the province to the other, none more so than in Cape Breton. And whereas no one better exemplified this dedication than Lockie McLeod, who passed away earlier today. Therefore, be it resolved that this House sends its deepest condolences to the McLeod family and expresses its admiration for his tireless efforts on behalf of injured workers throughout Nova Scotia. I express waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas June 2004 will mark the 11th anniversary of annual childcare awareness days throughout our province, and whereas the quality childcare provided by all daycare operators throughout our province provides for our children a firm foundation in life, and whereas a variety of events both in HRM and throughout our province will showcase the invaluable work provided by by child care practitioners in preparing our youngest citizens to be successful adults. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House acknowledge the great job all child care professionals do throughout our province and extend to all involved our best wishes for successful Awareness Month. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Police Week provides an excellent opportunity to reflect on the major contributions made by our police officers, as well as all those who work together to build safe and secure communities. And whereas Kentville Chief of Police Mark Mander presented the Advertiser newspaper with the Kentville Police Community Crime Prevention Award in recognition of the paper's efforts to prevent crime in their community. And whereas Advertiser Associate Editor Brent Fox accepted the award on behalf of the newsroom at a ceremony on May 13th. Therefore be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate Brent Fox and all the staff of the Advertiser on receiving the Kentville Police Community Crime Prevention Award and recognize that we all play a vital role in preventing crimes in our communities. I request waiver.
Request for waiver? Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Shearwater Military Family Resource Centre provides excellent services and support to the families of our military personnel and is a lifeline for many when their spouses are deployed overseas. Whereas the Shearwater MFRC recently obtained funding from the IWK Foundation to develop a Learning and Growing with Puppets initiative, utilizing puppets to teach children about such diverse subjects as bullying, vandalism, family violence, substance abuse, and self-esteem. Whereas the Shearwater MFRC will implement the puppet program in September 2004 as a result of the help of the Departments of Community Services, Health Promotion, the Capital Health District, Michelle Millette, Heather Cudmore McCarthy, the Halifax and Greenwood Military Family Resource Centres, Tallahassee Community School, and Echo Bois-Joli. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Shearwater Military Family Resource Centre on the development of its Learning and Growing with Puppets initiative, in which Executive Director Marianne McKinnon-Rodriguez and her staff the best of luck in the implementation of this very important program. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
For waiver, is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the provincial government will be creating 600 summer jobs for students this year, and whereas this is a marked decrease from the 2,600 jobs created by the previous Liberal administration in 1999, and whereas according to the Canadian Institute of Health Information, Nova Scotia now has the second highest youth unemployment in Canada, therefore be it resolved that the provincial government makes student employment in Nova Scotia a priority. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice, passage without debate.
Waiver here, no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the first Canadian female country music artist to become a member of the famed American institution, the Grand Ole Opry, will take place on Saturday, June 12th. And whereas the artist is none other than Terry Clark, a four-time and reigning Canadian Country Music Association Entertainer of the Year award winner and also author of the smash hit No Fear, written in honor of Canada's Special Olympic athletes. And whereas Ms. Clark is only the third Canadian besides Hank Snow and Stu Phillips to ever be invited to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry, therefore be it resolved, MLAs extend our sincere congratulations to country music star Terry Clark, who hit the country music charts in 1995 with her initial smash hit, Better Things to Do, and has never looked back, as she is formally inducted into the Grand Ole Opry on June 12th. And Mr. Speaker, I would seek waiver notice.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas farmers are not only the salt of the earth, but are also enduring as the land they work. And whereas the image of the wise old farmer as someone to be listened to and appreciated is as common and true as those of wise old judges and other learned folk. And whereas on May 10, 2004, Warren McPhee, a lifelong farmer of Upper Nine Mile River, celebrated his 85th birthday, therefore be it resolved this House of Assembly give best wishes to Warren McPhee on the occasion of his 85th birthday, wishing him many more to come, and thank him as a farmer for dedicating his life to providing for his family and as a result for us consumers. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, if it would be fine, I'd like to do an introduction just at this time as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to draw the members' attention to two visitors who are in our West Gallery today. They're residents of Halifax Clayton Park. One is Mrs. Robab Hagpan, and she is very active in lobbying for help for autistic children, and she's accompanied today by her daughter, who is a university student, Nagar Sakai. Thank you very much. If we could give her a warm welcome. Oh, yeah, read the resolution. Thank you. And don't sit down.
Special guest to the gallery today.
Thank you very much. And now I have a resolution today. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May 21st, the Department of Education will be hosting a model legislature for 52 high school students from across Nova Scotia. And whereas there are several events planned, including workshops, a banquet, tour of Province House, and a tour of Halifax. And whereas this model legislature will allow delegates to participate in caucus planning meetings and discussions to gain a greater understanding of the legislative process, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House extend their support to all of the delegates and wish them well on this educational weekend. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaver Bank.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution.
Order, please.
Whereas the
Order, please. The honourable member. Order. The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaver Bank. You have to wait till the light's on. Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Fall River Rebels recently captured the Nova Scotia Mini 1 Girls Divisional Basketball Championship, and whereas the Rebels' huge win came in a thrilling fashion as they edged the Bedford Eagles 32-31 in the championship final, and whereas the Rebels are led by head coach Les Rutherford and assistant coaches Eldon Caldwell and Kathleen Perrin, therefore be it resolved, MLAs recognize the championship honors recently won by the Fall River Rebels, wish them every future success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas skyrocketing gasoline prices are making it even more difficult for low-income Nova Scotians to make ends meet, and there seems to be no end in sight to these prices, and whereas an efficient and integrated public transportation system would help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, battle climate change, and provide more affordable transportation for many people, and whereas other provinces like Manitoba are encouraging people to do their part to reduce greenhouse gases by promoting this year's Commuter Challenge, advocating alternative forms of transportation and commuting together, and by recently introducing a Climate Change Community Challenge. Therefore be it resolved that Nova Scotia start making a genuine attempt to reduce greenhouse gases by following the lead of other provinces, improving public education, and challenging all of us to do our part. And, Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, here and no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 1 year ago today, the first case of BSE was discovered on a farm in Western Canada, and whereas farmers across this country were devastated by the negative impact on their industry, and whereas Canadians from one end of the country to the other gave their unqualified support to farmers throughout this very difficult time, therefore be it resolved that this House encourages the Nova Scotia government to continue efforts with the federal government to get the Canada-US border open to Canadian beef exports. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas yesterday, Cole Harbour's 16-year-old Sidney Crosby added one more high-profile title to what is becoming a long list when he was named the Canadian Hockey League Player of the Year at a luncheon in Kelowna, BC. Whereas the Rimouski Oceanic Centre, the youngest player ever to win the award, is also on top this year as top scorer in the entire CHL as a rookie with 54 goals and 81 assists in 59 games, setting a new Quebec Major Junior Hockey League record for points by a 16-year-old, and became the youngest player to ever score a goal for Canada at the World Junior Hockey Tournament. And whereas always the modest team player, Crosby commented that in his rookie season, I just wanted to work hard every night and hopefully I'd see results. A personal goal he has obviously exceeded, having also been named the CHL Rookie of the Year, having won the Canada Post Cup for earning the most points in 3-star selections. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House applaud the achievements today of this young and extremely talented Nova Scotian athlete and continue and wish Mr. Crosby continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm moving this motion on behalf of my colleague, the member for Halifax Needham, and I'll be seeking waiver. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 32nd Annual Provincial Black Basketball Association Invitational Tournament is taking place at various facilities throughout Halifax, May 19th to 23rd. And whereas this tournament is one of the largest cultural events in the African Nova Scotian community, bringing together local university players such as St. Mary's Gabe Goree, St. Francis Xavier recruit Tyler Richards, and from the NBA, Jalen Rose and Alvin Williams of the Toronto Raptors and Jamal Magloire of the New Orleans Hornets, whereas the Provincial Black Basketball Association promotes the Back to the Books program.
Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Thank you. And whereas the Provincial Black Basketball Association promotes the Back to the Books program and mentors to youth from grades 8 to 12 about the importance of academic as well as athletic achievements, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate the sponsors and organizers of the Provincial Black Basketball Association and commend President Carl Gannon, Sean Mantley, Clayton Gannon, and Irvin Carvery for their efforts to encourage, motivate, and inspire youth and the entire community through participation in this annual event. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of passage without debate.
Question waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Martin McDonald of Glace Bay is the former custodian of St. Michael's Junior High School and a former fire chief of the Glace Bay Volunteer Fire Department. And whereas Martin McDonald is described as someone who has never stopped giving back to his community and was always the first one to help others. And whereas Sunday, May 23rd, an Appreciation Day will be held at St. Michael's Junior High School for Martin McDonald. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House pay tribute to Martin McDonald for his selfless dedication to his community and his long service as school custodian. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Wilbur Jordan McCombs was a resident of Queens County for most of his life, except for the time he spent serving his province and his country as a member of the West Nova Scotia Regiment, Canada's Merchant Marine, and the Royal Canadian Air Force, and whereas Wilbur McCombs was said to have had 9 lives after surviving the sinking of the Empress of Britain in 1940, narrowly escaping from 2 separate airplane crashes, and spending nearly 2 years as a prisoner of war in the European theater. And whereas Wilbur McCombs returned to Queens County a hero, working until his retirement at Mersey Paper Company in Brooklyn and serving as the Queens County representative for the Prisoner of War Association, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House pay tribute to Wilbur McCombs, who passed away on April 2nd, 2004, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a friend, and a hero. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the School Community Outreach Readiness Endeavour Program, better known as SCORE, located in River John, Pictou County, is closing today, May the 20th, 2004, because of a lack of funding. And whereas the SCORE program has been a wonderful asset to the community and has vastly helped 3 to 5-year-olds in their social, emotional, physical, and intellectual growth in becoming much more school-ready. And whereas both the federal government, the original funding source, and this provincial government through the Department of Community Services
have thus far not provided funding to keep this very needed SCORE program operating. Therefore, it be resolved that the Minister of Community Services work with his department to review the Child Development Centre grant application from SCORE to find some way to allow this valuable program to continue.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton, the honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas because gasoline prices have skyrocketed as of late and nobody wants to give drivers a break, the least they could do is help the local service stations. Within their margin, whereas their margin is so low when customers use credit cards, the service station has to pay all the profit to the banks. And whereas if the service stations were not selling hot dogs and pop, they would be out of business because the refineries and the government are blind with greed. Therefore, be it resolved that this government take immediate action by taking off the blinders and help save these rural and urban service stations. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers that agreed? I hear a no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Agridome in Bible Hill officially opened on Friday, May 14th. Whereas the Agridome is being used by agricultural organizations and is now home to winter soccer for the Central Colchester Soccer Association, Highland Soccer, and also hosts lacrosse, baseball, football, and a walking club. Whereas there's community time scheduled for supervised games and sport activities for children and adults who might not otherwise have an opportunity to participate year-round. Therefore, be resolved that this House congratulate and thank the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission for its tremendous efforts which led to the building of the Agridome, a facility which will contribute to the health and active lifestyles of Nova Scotians, as well as hosting agriculture and other types of community events. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Waivers that agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John Ryan has been a role model for pharmacists throughout Nova Scotia and the Maritime Provinces for both his professional work and ideals, and whereas John Ryan was recently recognized by the Halifax Regional Municipality, the Province of Nova Scotia, and this legislature for his volunteer service to many community organizations. And whereas John Ryan has received several awards from provincial and national pharmacy associations for his ongoing service and vision. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate John Ryan, who will be awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws by Dalhousie University in recognition of his outstanding leadership and contribution to his profession and community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers that agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Métis Nation has a long history and deep roots here in the Maritime Provinces, and whereas the Eastern Woodlands Métis Nation, Nova Scotia, represents and responds to the political, cultural, social, and economic needs and interests of Métis Aboriginal people in this province, and whereas the Eastern Woodland Métis Nation have identified over 3,000 Métis people in Nova Scotia and wish to be officially recognized in this province, therefore it be resolved that the members of this House call on the government to meet with representatives of this group to better understand the history of the Métis people in this region, and that the government consider giving an appropriate form of provincial recognition to the Eastern Woodland Métis Nation of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
For waiver. Hear a no. No's is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mr. William Robley has held the position of teacher at Riverport Elementary and principal at Gold River Western Shore Elementary, Blockhouse Elementary, Hebbville Elementary, Lunenburg Academy, and Lunenburg Senior High School. And whereas William Robley has been a volunteer coach of basketball, soccer, volleyball, and an avid runner who has promoted healthy living to his students and competed in 70 marathons. And whereas William Robley spearheaded the Pumpkin Patrol, which partnered school, community, and law enforcement to promote a safe and responsible Halloween celebration in the town of Lunenburg, which demonstrates the high quality of leadership he has shown to his students throughout good times and challenging times over the past 13 years. He has been principal at Lunenburg Senior High School.
Order, please. Order, please. Now, Mr. Justice.
That this House congratulates Mr. William Robley on his contribution to the students and communities he has served over the past 33 years and wish him well in his retirement from public school administration. Mr. Speaker, I ask waiver of notice and pass without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas one of the most prestigious honours bestowed upon a unit of the Royal Canadian Air Cadets is being offered the privilege and distinction of the Freedom of the Sydney. And whereas the tradition of being granted Freedom of the Sydney originates from a custom first observed in the cities of London and Edinburgh in the 17th century, when the right title, privilege, honour and distinction of marching on ceremonial occasions with bayonets fixed, drums beating, bands playing and colours flying, and with the first accorded to the town guard. And whereas on May 22nd, 2004, at 10 o'clock, the Whitney Pier 587 Air Cadet Squadron will parade through the streets of Sydney in honour of their 50th anniversary. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Legislative Assembly congratulate the Whitney Pier 587 Air Cadet Squadron on being granted the Freedom of the Sydney for its 50 years meritorious service, recognizing the admirable record of its outstanding unit and the affection and esteem in which it is held by the community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and pass without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Institute for Health Information's latest health indicators report shows that Nova Scotia has the dubious distinction of having the highest crime rate, excluding traffic, east of Manitoba. And whereas this report shows that Nova Scotia has a substantially higher crime rate than that of Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. And whereas it is unlikely that any one single factor or theory accounts for this higher crime rate, therefore be it resolved that the Department of Justice with other government departments develop a comprehensive, multifaceted action plan to deal with the ever-increasing crime rate in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice.
Mr. Waiver, here or no? Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Team Canada Polar Bears selected young ringette players aged 15 to 25 from across the country to represent Canada at the Challenge Cup in Helsinki and the Czech Challenge Cup in Prague in August 2004. And whereas Christina Van Eden of Lower Sackville is only one of two athletes in Atlantic Canada invited to join Canada's team for these tournaments, and whereas in addition to the Challenge Cups, these young women will be playing exhibition games throughout Finland featuring many of the best ringette players in the world. Therefore be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate ringette player Christina Van Eden on being selected as member of Team Canada Polar Bears and wish her and her teammates success in August in Helsinki and Prague. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Michael Kennedy, a grade 9 student at Bridgeport School, has proven he is a very capable debater. And whereas Michael placed first in the grade 9 division at the 27th annual public speaking event at Memorial High School. And whereas the Glace Bay student also placed first overall in the junior high division at the event sponsored by the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Michael Kennedy on a fine showing and wish him all the best in his future endeavours in public speaking. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas enforcement and protection by the rule of law is necessary for every community's safety and advancement, and whereas the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have a well-deserved worldwide reputation as a premier and professional public police force with a presence in the Indian Brook community for some years. Whereas on May 5th, 2004, the RCMP and the community of Indian Brook celebrated the opening of a new RCMP detachment facility in that community. Therefore, be resolved, this House of Assembly congratulate the community of Indian Brook and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police on their continuing relationship and wish them success in their future together. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the NDP claims to represent average Nova Scotians by making statements like big insurance companies are getting rich on the backs of Nova Scotians, but apparently it's okay that large oil companies are getting rich on the backs of Nova Scotians. Whereas on the one hand, the NDP condemns support for big business like Sobeys or Michelin, but on the other, they applaud support for large multinational oil companies. And whereas the NDP are currently supporting a backdoor corporate handout to Imperial Oil that is the equivalent of what the NDP used to call corporate welfare and will be paid by the taxpayers of Halifax Regional Municipality. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House ask that the real NDP stand up and explain why they support using taxpayers' dollars to provide a subsidy to a large oil company while that same company is getting rich by charging Nova Scotians $1 a litre for gas at the pumps.
Notice is tabled. Order, please. The honourable member for Dartmouth East on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome to the West Gallery.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Dartmouth East has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome to the West Gallery some students from the political science class from Bridgeway Academy, which is in my riding, Dartmouth East. And they're here today with George Doucette, who was a former MLA for Halifax Cobequid and a speaker. Former speaker, 77 to 78, and he was a Liberal MLA. So I'd like the House to welcome him here today. Thank you.
Certainly welcome our special guest to the gallery today, the honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and he was a pretty fine school principal, too. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Tassa Adam A Ducks captured the 2004 Provincial Hockey Championship in Yarmouth, whereas this season's championship is the result of many hours of practice, whereas these hockey players have had a great, fun-filled season. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate coaches Craig Butler, Daryl Creaser, Gordy Delano, and Paul Cook, and the players of the Tassa Adam A Ducks on their provincial championship. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the parent-teacher organization at Astral Drive Elementary School recognized that new playground equipment was required for the children at the school and in the community at large. Whereas under the leadership of Arlene White, the PTO raised over $21,000 in 8 months to cover a large portion of the cost of replacing the playground equipment, a remarkable feat and a sign of the commitment of the parents, staff of Astral Drive Elementary School, and the residents in the area. Whereas the Nova Scotia Office of Health Promotion and the Halifax Regional Municipality provided the remaining funds required to complete the replacement project. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize the efforts of the Astral Drive Elementary School parent-teacher organization, in particular Arlene White, and all the parents and staff at the school in replacing the playground equipment at the school and ensuring a safe and healthy activity remains in the community on which children can play. I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Richmond.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the last election, the New Democratic Party and its leader campaigned on what they called a better deal for today's families. Whereas the NDP leader railed against big insurance companies for skyrocketing insurance premium, But now that same leader believes it's okay to subsidize big oil companies profiting from skyrocketing gasoline prices. Whereas unfortunately for Nova Scotians, NDP principles don't apply to big oil companies who are getting rich on the back of Nova Scotia drivers. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognize that the NDP supports a subsidy for Imperial Oil, but not for consumers of their gasoline, and that the NDP change their mantra from a better deal for today's families to a better deal for today's big oil.
Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas David Parks of Lunenburg, Nova Scotia will be celebrating his 65th birthday on May 22nd, and whereas David has been long respected as an insurance agent with Lunenburg Insurance, and whereas David has been very involved with St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Lunenburg and was the organist for many years, therefore it be resolved that the members of the House of Assembly wish David all the best as he celebrates with his family and many friends on the occasion of his 65th birthday, and I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas for 34 years, Mr. Bob Beaton worked as an educator in the school system of the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board. And whereas for the last 9 years, Bob Beaton has held the positions of vice principal and then in the Whitney-Pier area, the principal of the new Harborside Elementary School. And whereas on June 26, 2004, Bob Beaton will retire from his position as principal of Harborside Elementary School and from the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate Bob Beaton on his retirement and thank him for his many years of dedicated service and commitment to the education of the youth in our community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried. If there are no further resolutions, there has been a request to revert the order of business back to presenting reading petitions. Is it agreed? Agreed. The Honourable Member for Chester St. Margaret's on a petition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to present a petition from the residents of Upper Blandford, and we are submitting a formal request for repairs to section Highway 329, which serves Upper Blandford. Specifically, this section travels from the junction of the main Highway 329 to the end of the Upper Blandford Road. I'd very much like to present this petition. Thank you. And I've signed it, yes.
Just as table. Orders of the day or questions put by members. Question period begin at 12:56 and end at 1:56. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the pressures that Cape Breton families face are rising. Here is a list of the misery index. The unemployment rate in Cape Breton is double what it is in Halifax. The island has lost 10% of its population, more than 10,000 people in 10 years. The community has the highest rates of illnesses such as cancer and respiratory illnesses in Atlantic Canada, and Cape Bretoners also have a shorter life expectancy than the rest of Canada. Yet Cape Breton is one of the most beautiful places in the world, and Cape Bretoners are some of the hardest workers in this province. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier is this: when are you going to introduce an economic development plan for Cape Breton?
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Despite significant success in Cape Breton, the government is prepared to acknowledge there is much left to do. And we are working effectively with ECBC. We are participants in the Growth Fund. We have contributed tremendous resources to infrastructure projects in the Cape Breton area. We are committing resources to improving the community college in industrial Cape Breton. We are doing many things. There is much, we acknowledge, left to be done.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, municipal leaders have been trying to bring the crisis in Cape Breton to the attention of this government, but instead of working with these leaders, the Premier remains combative. 22 people have died in Cape Breton in the last 18 months in connection with drug abuse, yet the Premier closed the only residential addiction program on the island, and the province has yet to introduce a plan to deal with OxyContin addictions. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier is this: the social and economic problems facing Cape Bretons deserve your undivided attention. When will you present a comprehensive strategy to deal with these problems?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The government does acknowledge, and certainly on many occasions during the current sitting, the Minister of Health has acknowledged the tremendous problem with prescription drug abuse in Cape Breton. Not to say, Mr. Speaker, that it is not a problem across our province, because, Mr. Speaker, it is. We are awaiting the recommendations of the task force, and when those recommendations are in place, the government will act.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cape Breton is battling high unemployment, low incomes, a health crisis, cuts to education, and high tuition rates. The relationship between the local council and the province is so bad that the council had to go through a freedom of information process to access revenue and expenditure details that affect them. The island should be a provincial asset. It is an international travel destination. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier is, when are you going to start working with Cape Breton instead of against it?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have an excellent working relationship with organizations in industrial Cape Breton that are positively promoting the Cape Breton image and working effectively to provide
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Premier has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue to work with organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce, such as the local university, such as the local campus of the community college, with organizations such as ECBC and the Cape Breton Growth Fund. We are anxious to work with any group in Cape Breton that's anxious to work in a very positive, productive way.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, today residents in Sackville were treated to self-serve gasoline at the bargain basement price of 75 cents a litre. That's if they had the patience to fight the lineups and the traffic that resulted. Ironically, Mr. Speaker, gasoline was selling for 75 cents at all Metro Halifax gas stations back in January, and at the time most people thought it was too high, and the Premier promised to bring forward a plan to lower prices. Mr. Speaker, the Tory government could have formed an all-party committee 4 months ago, and that same committee would be reporting back to the House today with solutions. That did not happen, and 4 months have been wasted, and Nova Scotians continue to pay skyrocketing gas prices. Mr. Speaker, the time for study is over. Nova Scotians are demanding action now, not when the summer driving season is over. So my question to the Premier is, will the Premier stop the illusion that his government is actually doing something and reduce gasoline prices today?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And despite some objection from some MLAs in the House, the government has been very proactive. We brought forward legislation. We have arranged that this summer a select committee of the House will seek the input of Nova Scotians on this very, very difficult problem. And while I am disappointed that we don't have the legislative ability to immediately put into effect those recommendations, we'll be coming back in the fall, and presumably we'll have to go through the exercise again, and that will be to bring forward legislation to implement the recommendations of the Select Committee.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's this same Premier that had no problem recalling the legislature to take away the bargaining rights of nurses in the middle of summer. He should have no problem recalling the legislature to provide Nova Scotians with immediate relief on gases once that select committee finally reports. So to suggest that the delay of that bill is going to be a delay for Nova Scotians is irresponsible, and his government certainly showed they had no problem recalling the legislature back then. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are looking for relief now. The crude prices is something we cannot control, but the Premier can certainly control taxation, and he can certainly control the 2 cents a litre that his government imposed on Nova Scotians 2 years ago, breaking his own campaign promise. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are puzzled as to why this government, with the support of the NDP, is interested in giving a subsidy to big oil, but not a break for Nova Scotians.
Question, please.
Mr. Speaker,
Order, please.
My question to the Premier. Will the Premier take action today that will result in lower gas prices tomorrow instead of giving subsidizing big oil companies through property tax?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, because the question allows me to remind Nova Scotians, to remind members of the House, how important the infrastructure is here in Nova Scotia, and how important it is that we not lose our last refinery. I was around, Mr. Speaker, when they dismantled the Ultramar refinery, or the Gulf refinery at the Strait of Canso, Mr. Speaker. I was around here when they dismantled the Ultramar refinery right across the harbor. I will not be around here, Mr. Speaker, to see that Imperial Oil refinery dismantled.
The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to suggest that giving a property tax break to Imperial Oil is the only means to assist that company to keep that refinery here is proof that this government is bankrupt of any ideas or solutions as to how to help economic growth here in this province. And for the Premier to suggest that municipal taxpayers should bear the brunt of economic development in this province is proof that the Premier has given up on his own economic development tools by the fact that they have a broom closet now for an Office of Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians want a break under gas prices. This Premier had no problem mailing out $155 checks at election time. Why now will he not give that relief? My question is, why won't
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Richmond on the final supplementary, please.
Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier is why won't the Premier help today's families by simply lowering gas taxes and provide direct relief to Nova Scotians for the high gas prices they're paying now?
The honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can remind the member opposite and remind members of the House of something I reminded them of a few days ago in question period. We put our gas tax money on the roads. We use it to pave, to build new twin highways. We use it to build bridges, unlike the federal government that simply keeps 90 to 95% of its fuel excise tax.
The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in April, home care fees went up by 25%, from $8 to $10 per hour. We are beginning to receive calls from home care clients who are considering reducing or discontinuing their services because they cannot afford the extra costs. Most of these seniors whose income is just not high enough that they are not exempt from home care fees, but low enough that an extra $2 an hour, Mr. Speaker, is a major concern. So my question to the Minister of Health is this: why did he choose to increase revenue by hitting home care clients with fee hikes?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member, in referencing that, knows that those fees have not been adjusted for quite some period of time, Mr. Speaker, and we feel that they are, under the circumstances, they're appropriate. Nobody likes to increase fees. However, we want to continue to provide good, solid health care for the people of this province, and that's part of the plan, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable leader of the official opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, $2 an hour multiplied by 10 to 15 hours of service per week adds up quickly. The present system is especially hard on middle-income seniors who must pay up to $240 a month before the fee cap kicks in. That's on top of increased pharmacare premiums and a new penalty of up to $50 for canceling an appointment without 24 hours notice. So I asked the Minister of Health, why is it that seniors in this province always seem to foot the biggest bill for health care services?
Good question.
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We in this government provide very good services to seniors. We have one of the most comprehensive pharmacare programs in the country, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that we've chose to take actions such as the ones that we have rather than lay off workers. I understand the government of Saskatchewan has laid off 250 nurses, Mr. Speaker, as part of their plan.
The honourable leader of the official opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, home care is far less expensive than nursing home costs, and the comprehensive home care services are proven to help keep seniors healthy and in their own homes longer. If seniors are forced to cut back on home care services or eliminate home care entirely, the costs will be felt by acute care and by nursing home care. So my final question to the minister is, will he commit to reviewing the fee structure to ensure that lower and middle-income seniors can afford home care services?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the thrust of this government's initiative with respect to health care is to ensure that our citizens are able to remain in their homes for as long as possible. That is what we're driving ourselves forward with respect to our planning. The planning is designed to do that, and we're going to be developing policies that will continue to enhance the capacity of individuals to remain in their homes. That, Mr. Speaker, is a priority of this government.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thanks. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, the Halifax Regional Municipality is expected to grow by approximately 100,000 people over the next 25 years. This rapid growth will no doubt lead to new lands being developed for homes, apartments and condos, as it has for the last 15 years in my riding of Halifax Clayton Park. Mr. Speaker, now is the time for a plan to conserve green space within HRM for future generations. Can the Minister, please, Minister of Natural Resources, please tell the House if his department has plans to protect and expand Crown lands in HRM before all of our green space is depleted?
The honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not quite sure what the members, where she's going here, but I can tell you that my department is working with HRM to preserve the natural resources that we have in this province, like McNabbs, Hemlock Ravine. We've been working with HRM and their department and their Parks Department to preserve what we have now, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As development continues, many residents of HRM are expressing concern for the remaining natural resources in their communities. A recent poll conducted by Corporate Research Associates found that 73% of respondents in HRM were in favour of more protected areas on Crown lands. Mr. Speaker, a large tract of Crown land exists in my riding in the Birch Cove Lakes Blue Mountain area. Mr. Speaker, will the minister commit to ending the practice of trading off parcels of Crown land in the Birch Cove Lakes Blue Mountain area to developers for land in other parts of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A week ago, Wednesday evening, I had the opportunity to speak to a group of people in the Sackville area. The member from the NDP party and two members from our party were at the event, and we are trying to secure a piece of property out there to enhance the park areas in that community. But, Mr. Speaker, I will also state that this government is not in the mode of selling Crown land. We're trying to enhance our land base in this province and protect land bases in this province, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the current Minister of Community Services, in a letter dated May 25, 2001, described the Birch Cove Lakes Blue Mountain area as a potential provincial park candidate. And I have a copy of that letter here to table today, so I'll leave that. And Mr. Speaker, will the minister commit today to working towards the creation of a provincial park in the Birch Cove Lakes Blue Mountain area?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and absolutely we'll work with HRM, and my good colleague here, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia, tells me that's in his writing, and he would like to work with me also to enhance the area there and have more parkland, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm inspired by the honourable minister's comments to the previous questions. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I hope you can remember, I raised the issue of the Department of Natural Resources plan to allow Louisiana Pacific to cut in the Nictaw River area. The area is a spawning ground for salmon, a local recreation treasure, and a tourist attraction. So in 2002, the municipality of Annapolis County sent a letter to this government pointing out that given the value of the area, Council wanted the province to place the area under a development moratorium to prevent logging and road building. And Mr. Speaker, I'll table that letter. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Natural Resources: why did you allow cutting in this area without adequate consultation, and when you knew there was so much opposition to that?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the honourable member. This came to my attention approximately a week and a half ago by the good member from Annapolis, asked me if I would look into the file. I indicated to staff to have a meeting with the concerned citizens of the area and go through the area that they're talking about. And Mr. Speaker, I have also made a statement very clear to this House and to all members that I would definitely meet with the warden for the county that is showing a concern, and I've asked the member from Annapolis if he'd like to accompany me at that meeting.
Now, the member for Hants East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Young member for Hants East has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have some regard for the member from Annapolis, but I'm not sure why he wants to hang with the government members. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Annapolis County Council sent this letter to the Minister's Department this week, and I'll table that. They say, and I quote, "Our municipality respectfully requested discussions about these lands, but has not been given adequate opportunity for input. I assume it's not your department's intent to exclude or discount the municipality as a local voice of the community. The department is now implementing a management process that is contrary to local wishes, representations, values, and stakeholders' best interest," end quote. So my question, Minister, the county has asked you to put a moratorium on all logging and road building in the area until local residents have been heard. Will you commit to do this?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite. I'm sure the member from Annapolis, he wants results onto that. That's why that member's consulted with this minister. That's why this minister is committed to that member and to the municipality that I will meet with those people before anything transpires, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Hants East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think that was the question I asked. Mr. Speaker,
He chose to answer.
local businesses depend on the Nictaw River area to attract tourists to their area. Businesses like the Falcourt Inn. The Annapolis County Council is just asking for some balance to be injected into the process and that the multiple uses and sustainability of the area be considered. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister, what will it take for you to make sure that the concerns of local residents are addressed before you allow any cutting in this area?
Now, Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, again, I guess maybe the member's not hearing very clear today. I have just stated, Mr. Speaker, that I am willing to meet with those people, that staff has already met with those people, Mr. Speaker, and that there's been a management plan in place for that piece of property for a number of years. There's been a management plan working with the company that has that under lease, Mr. Speaker. And we definitely will consult with the community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, a member for Cape Breton West. Now, a member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question will not be for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. Mr. Speaker, for a month now, the area's largest telecommunications firm, Alliant, has been involved in a strike. The management has been working to maintain services for their clients, but it looks as though the work stoppage may be a little longer than initially anticipated. So my question to the minister, does the minister have a contingency plan in place in the event of a disruption in service for the restoration, if necessary, of emergency services such as 911?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I'm sure the member opposite appreciates, that's a federally regulated industry. However, we have been monitoring the situation and working with the partners in any way that we possibly can to look for a resolution, and there are backup plans in place for emergency situations.
Now, member Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the minister for his answer. Mr. Speaker, the workers as well as management and staff want to see a resolution to this strike as quickly as possible because it affects all 4 Atlantic provinces. So my question to the minister, will the minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, tell the House what communications he has had with his counterparts in the rest of Atlantic Canada to ensure that Nova Scotians will not be caught off guard if a problem were to arise from the situation at Alliant.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I personally haven't had any discussions with my counterparts in the other provinces. I expect that my staff has, but I will endeavour to look into that and report back to the member.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like the answer today, just in case. Mr. Speaker, keeping an open line of communications with both management and staff is vital in resolving this work stoppage, and is critical to which the services that could be affected for the people both today and in the future. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister: will the Minister apprise members of the House as to what communications he has had with management at Alliant and the union involved with the work stoppage at Alliant, and what the results of those communications were?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly will make the honourable member opposite aware of any actions or correspondence that we have had with those individuals and groups.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
I've been inspired too, I guess. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. and Mrs. Barber are 87 and 75 years old. They live in Ketch Harbor. In the wake of Hurricane Juan, they spent nearly $3,000 having downed trees cleared from their property. They know the importance of having a fire break around their house. The trouble is, the land beside them belongs to the province, and the trees there haven't been removed yet. Summer is approaching, and the Barbers are worried about forest fire. My question to the Minister of Natural Resources is, what deadlines do you have for removing down wood from Crown lands in HRM?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not aware of the situation the member is relating to today, but I would take that under advisement, and I will get back to the member.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, on January 29th, Mr. Barber wrote to HRM and pointed out the danger of fire. I'll table that letter. Fire in the coming summer which is now here. When I contacted Halifax Regional Fire Department, I was told the downed trees were on provincial land and not their problem. A representative from the Department of Natural Resources told me they were waiting to hear from the federal government about disaster assistance. Apparently they're still waiting. Fire doesn't wait to find out who's taking care of the bills. Why is the government waiting?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the honourable member. That is a true statement. We still are waiting for the federal government. We've been dealing with the federal government on our parks, onto the hurricane damage that we've had here in the province. But if there's an urgency for that one file, you definitely get that to me, and I'll see that staff deals with that immediately. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Halifax Atlantic on your final supplementary.
There's certainly urgency on this particular file because the Barbers are senior citizens, and they would remove the trees themselves probably if they could afford to, and were young and strong enough to. But that's not the case, and there have been more than 35 fires already. Everywhere that there's Crown land adjoining private homes within fire break distance, there's a real danger. My question is, will you commit to creating those fire breaks by removing dead trees on Crown lands adjoining private homes within the fire break zone?
Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, through you to the honourable member, I will commit here today that we are doing everything in our power with all the manpower that we have in our office to eliminate the potential fire hazards that we have to adjacent property owners, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
He's got 29 minutes.
Taking my time. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transport and Public Works. Mr. Speaker, alder bushes are a common sight along the rural roads of Nova Scotia. They are a menace to safety along our highways and back roads. Recently, I've been receiving phone calls in my constituency office from concerned citizens. My constituencies have told me the alder bushes need to be removed from the ditches. They are calling the Department of Transport, and the local offices are telling them to cut them down themselves because they have no money or resources to deal with it. Mr. Speaker, can the minister tell this House, is the trimming or removal of alder bushes a Department of Transport responsibility, or do the people have to do it on their own?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, removing alder bushes from ditches is certainly a departmental responsibility. I don't know what the circumstances are in this particular case. However, if the department did respond in the fashion that the honourable member has suggested, I'm a little disappointed with that response.
The member for Digby Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, they claim they have no money in their budget to do this job. Mr. Speaker, the alder bushes are a danger to the people as they pull out of their driveways because they hamper visibility of oncoming traffic. Some people have taken matters into their own hands and are having to cut these alders themselves. My question to the minister, is the Department of Transport going to deal with the growing problem, and when?
There you go. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd suggest that all the bushes are certainly a growing problem, but and Mr. Speaker, all areas of the province are allocated funding under the RIM program. A portion of the RIM program is devoted to cutting alder bushes and other scrub along the sides of the roads.
The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we are dealing with a safety problem here. Alders are a fast-growing, resilient bush, and we know it is expensive to keep these bushes cut down with traditional methods that we've used over the past years. It has been said that cutting alders in late August or early September and repeating this the next year is the best way to remove them for good. With today's expertise and technology, there must be a solution. Mr. Speaker, can the minister tell this House, is the government looking for other technologies to deal with what is essentially a safety problem?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. We've got a gigantic machine, actually, that chops down alder bushes, and quite honestly, I believe we have the best expertise in removing those kinds of obstructions to visibility along highways anywhere in the Atlantic provinces, because out at Miller Lake, they developed a machine about 10, 15 years ago, which they hook onto the end of an excavator, and it is very, very efficient.
I'm a member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on October 3rd last year, Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court found Section 10 of the Workers' Compensation Act to be unconstitutional, Mr. Speaker. And at that point, Mr. Speaker, the court advised this government that had 6 months to get its act together and get rid of the offending clauses, Mr. Speaker. Yet this government has treated that with much contempt and very little regard, Mr. Speaker. Now, I mentioned earlier in this House today the passing of one of the tireless workers on behalf of injured workers in this province, Mr. Lockie McLeod. Lockie will not live to see those reforms. So I'm going to ask the minister, why are you not listening to the stakeholders at WCB instead of the CEO and the chairman of the board?
Now, Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, with regards to the workers' compensation and the chronic pain issue, we made a statement some time ago that we are looking at spending $168 million to clean up the backlog. We are listening to the Supreme Court. We want to ensure that we treat people fairly, and what we're doing is looking at a path forward that will take care of these injured workers to the best of our ability under the law. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that's less than a path forward. It's obstructions. It's obstructions for injured workers throughout this province, Mr. Speaker. Bill 20 is not going to be dealt with in this House, today or any time in the near future, Mr. Speaker. But what we do have in this province is other discrimination being allowed to be put forward by the board. There's injured workers at the Waterford Consolidated Hospital, Mr. Speaker, that are suffering from environmental diseases, but the board is blocking them, will not allow them to go forward on an individual basis. Minister, why are you allowing this to happen?
Now, Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, my understanding is that we're waiting for additional information to be gathered and additional reports to come into the workers' compensation so that those claims can be assessed.
Now, member for Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the same problem that got that place in the mess it's in today, by discriminating against workers in a block. Yet, this minister doesn't care. These people deserve to have their case heard, and as we very well know in this province, Mr. Speaker, justice delayed is justice denied. When will the workers at the Waterford Consolidated Hospital get their justice, Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's very unfortunate the member opposite said, I don't care, because I certainly do. I've been involved with this instance, and this is something that's important to all members and to all people who are associated with this circumstance. And we're doing what we can to ensure that the information gets to the Workers' Compensation Board and that these claims get processed.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, in March of this year, a study was released on food security in Nova Scotia. Not surprisingly, it found that many Nova Scotians, including those on social assistance and the working poor, are experiencing food insecurity. Key recommendations of this study include that the Department of Community Services index food and shelter assistance rates to encourage healthier lifestyles and adequate food supply for these families. My question to the Minister of Community Services: what action will your department be taking on this report's recommendations?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for her question. I also thank her for her questions during the estimates and those from the other members of the opposition. Mr. Speaker, we increased the basic personal allowance this year, effective October the 1st, by $4. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Member Dartmouth South, Portland Valley on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the study used the Nutritional Food Basket Measure, which is a no-frills budget that provides healthy basic nutrition. The nutritional food basket for a family of 4 in Nova Scotia would be $572.70 a month. The allowance for a family of 4 on employment support and income assistance is considerably less, including the $4 that might start in the fall. And it must also cover utilities, clothing, and other needs. My question to the minister: when will he admit that community services policies are contributing to the high number of families in this province experiencing food insecurity?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for her question. Actually, Mr. Speaker, the component in the basic personal allowance, which is devoted for food security, indeed, that's what we use to determine the amount of the increase. So that's exactly what we use to come up with that number that's going into effect on October the 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government boasts about finally eliminating the clawback of the National Child Tax Benefit Supplement a couple of years ago. What it doesn't advertise is that it cut the personal needs budget for children at the same time, leaving families worse off. So I ask the minister, when will his department finally take steps to ensure that families on assistance and the working poor have enough nutritious food to eat?
Now, Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for pointing out that we were one of the provinces that stopped this practice. Previously, Mr. Speaker, what happened is that it's what's now the National Child Benefit would get clawed back if the family was on community services. That no longer happens in this province, and the $250 some odd a month for food and clothing for those children goes directly to the families. There is no clawback, and any increases in the National Child Benefit accrues to the families, regardless of whether they're on community services or not. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister responsible for the Workers' Compensation Act. It is incumbent upon this government, Mr. Speaker, to address the decision of chronic pain made by the Supreme Court of Canada in a full and comprehensive manner. And while the concerns of the sufferers are, of course, extremely important, the Minister must not forget his obligation to employers. And I would like to ask the Minister, what consultations, if any, has he held with the members of the business community in developing his response to the Supreme Court decision?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to say that there have been numerous consultation processes that have taken place with injured workers, with employees, with employer groups, and those consultations have been held through the Workers' Compensation Board. They've been held through the Office of Environment and Labour, and they've been held as well with other groups who have reported back to ensure that we get a lot of information in as we work through the decision-making process.
The honourable member for Preston on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I cannot emphasize strongly enough how important that the Minister address this issue fair and equitably. It's a balancing act, Mr. Speaker. On one hand, the Minister has the concerns of the chronic pain sufferers to consider, and on the other hand, a negative financial impact upon their employers will have a ripple effect and could extend across the entire workforce, reducing competitiveness, which will probably result in job losses. I would like to ask the Minister, what has been the reaction of business community to his proposed resolution of this matter?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly acknowledge that it is a balancing act, and it's something that the Board of Directors of the Workers' Compensation Board have looked at. It is something that we have to be fair to injured workers, and we also have to appreciate that we have to have remuneration for the Workers' Compensation Board, and payments that go to workers' compensation have to be fair as well to keep our businesses competitive.
Now, member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's be very clear, Mr. Speaker, that the cost of implementing the workers' proposed response to the Supreme Court decision could cause great concern. And I have a letter here which I'll table that was written to the Vice President of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association, expressing this illegal opinion, expressing grave concern over the possibility of another court challenge. And they point to 4 separate things: retention of Section 10E, permanent medical impairment of 3 to 6%, and an appointment of benefits for chronic pain, and retroactivity of new regulations. Now, if this goes back to court again,
question, please.
There's going to be a very serious impact on the businesses of Nova Scotia. Therefore, I'd ask the Minister, will the Minister provide a guarantee to this House and to all Nova Scotians that we'll consult with all stakeholders,
Order, please.
Businesses?
Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. The honourable member on his question, please.
Will the Minister provide a guarantee to this House and all Nova Scotians that will consult with the shareholders, particularly the employers, to find a reasonable solution that addresses concerns and eliminate further court cases?
The honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's certainly my intention and everybody involved with this process that we will be consulting, and we will ensure that we discuss with stakeholders more in the future, certainly, than we have in the past, and we will continue in that vein. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are for the minister responsible for the Insurance Act. George Patterson lives in Halifax Fairview, and he is peeved. His auto insurance policy is with Meloche Monix. That's one of the insurers who drove a truck through the Liberal Tory insurance law by taking the 20% off a high fictional rate rather than the rate that Mr. Patterson had actually paid the year before. But instead of standing up for Mr. Patterson, the minister changed the regulations to legalize the insurance company's nonsense. My question to the minister is why, when faced with a choice of standing up for large, very profitable national insurance companies or standing up for Nova Scotians like George Patterson, did the minister pick the insurance companies?
The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that the New Democratic Party is a very hard sell. They've just completely failed to understand what's gone on with regard to auto insurance in this province over the past 12 months. Today, and I'll say this again, please, this...
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Deputy Premier has the floor.
Unfortunately, we might not be in here next week and to answer further questions. So I'd like to advise the honourable members that, as a matter of fact, I just received a bulletin here that shows that over the past 12 months, insurance premiums in Nova Scotia have decreased by 10.6%, whereas in Manitoba they've gone up by 3.9%, in Saskatchewan by 1.4%, in Quebec by 1.9%. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to...
Order, please. Young member for Halifax Fairview, your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I see we're ending the session on the same irrelevant nonsense that the minister always gives to us. George Patterson discovered something even more disturbing than the perfidy of his government. After protesting to Miloš Bonex and trying to enlist the support of the Superintendent of Insurance, and after months and months of waiting, Mr. Patterson was advised that Miloš Bonex would give him his rebate, but only because he had complained and only because he hadn't given up. So my question to the minister is, when will the minister start taking the side of Nova Scotia drivers and force Miloš Bonex and other like-minded companies to give the rebate to all drivers and not just to the ones who complain?
The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I forget the actual numbers, but it's in excess of 300,000 Nova Scotians who have received rebates totaling $55 million since last November the 1st. Mr. Speaker, at least the gentleman that the honourable member refers to now has the opportunity to complain to somebody and get his rebate. Heretofore, and in the provinces that have public insurance, you don't have that ability.
Now, member Halifax Fairview, and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, all I'll say about that is that's not true, and the minister either should know it, he does know it, and he's saying it anyway, or he just doesn't have his facts straight. Mr. Speaker, the minister likes to talk about the $55 million Nova Scotia drivers have got back, but I want the Liberals and the Tories to remember where that money's coming from. It's not coming from the insurance companies, Mr. Speaker. It is coming from the pockets of injured Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal-Tory insurance law implements a temporary rebate in exchange for a permanent slashing of injury benefits, and that's where the money is coming from. So my question to the minister...
Order, please. Order, please. Young member Halifax Fairview, and his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want that crowd or that crowd ever to...
Order, please. Order, please. Young member for Halifax Fairview, and his final supplementary.
When will the Liberals and the Tories join the New Democratic Party and fight for a better insurance deal for Nova Scotia families?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's not too many people who want to join the New Democratic Party, I can assure you of that. In fact, our membership in the Conservative Party has been moving ahead rather well.
Now a member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker.
Order,
Mr.
please.
Speaker.
Member Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, as much as the Minister would like this issue to disappear, there are workers at the New Waterford Hospital that are not getting any better, Mr. Speaker. High levels of lead and mercury have robbed these individuals of their working lives, and irrespective of whether or not there is disagreement as to how these workers have acquired these high levels, the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, they are still sick. My question to the minister: when is the minister going to admit that there's a serious health problem with the workers from the New Waterford Hospital and pay for much-needed health care treatment?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, because we recognize that there is a problem there, a very serious problem, we have in fact had Dr. Haynes in very recently. And I'm pleased to say that a number of the affected workers have met with him. We have some interim reports from Dr. Haynes, but we're anticipating a more complete report from him in the very near future.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Meeting is not paying for the health costs that are necessary here. Mr. Speaker, these residents, like every other Nova Scotian, deserve to have their health care paid for. Mr. Speaker, when an individual arrives at a hospital or a doctor's office with an illness, no one questions how they got sick, they just receive treatment. The New Waterford Hospital workers deserve the same treatment from their own health care system, Mr. Speaker. And my first supplementary to the minister: given that we live in a province and a country where health care treatment is covered, could the minister please explain why to date he has refused to cover the health care costs of the New Waterford Hospital workers?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the preliminary reports that we have from Dr. Haynes is that he does not believe that there is an element of it is not related to metal toxicity. That's a preliminary part of his report, and obviously we're awaiting the more complete report, which we expect to get in the near future.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, what is not at issue here is the fact that these workers are sick. And I always assume, like all Nova Scotians, that if you're sick in this province and need treatment, that treatment was available for you. Well, Mr. Speaker, the treatment, it doesn't make any difference why this situation occurred. As far as I'm concerned, it makes a difference that they can't get their health treatment paid for in this province, in a province that's supposed to provide health care to all its citizens. We know these people are sick, and some will suggest they're sick because of their employment in New Waterford Hospital. That's fine. But knowing that they're sick, why won't this government pay for their health care costs in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we indeed are paying costs related to those costs that have been recommended by physicians in the area. And Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, Dr. Haynes has already, in his preliminary report, suggested that metal toxicity is not one of the issues at stake here.
The Honourable Member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Thank you. To the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. Mr. Speaker, last month we learned that black contractors had been virtually shut out of working on a $2.9 million North Preston Community Centre. No affirmative action program was in place to ensure that construction dollars stayed in that community. The Black Construction Association of Nova Scotia says this is typical of the government. Very few tenders ever make it to companies owned by members of visible minorities. So I wonder if the minister will tell us, why do minority groups continue to be virtually shut out of the provincial tendering process in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
The question was for me, I presume, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the tendering process in this province is transparent, and if the honourable member knows of any companies that are having that kind of difficulty, I would certainly like to be made aware of it.
The honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the struggle of marginalized groups to find a place in the economy of the province is serious. The government does not always send the right signals. We remember that the former Liberal Premier made headlines in 1998 when he made his comments about black and Aboriginal students at Dalhousie Law School. Little has changed for equity-seeking groups in this province since then. A clause permitting affirmative action regulations exists in the Government Purchasing Act, but to date, no regulations have ever been produced. So I'm asking the minister, why has your government never introduced affirmative action guidelines into the tendering process?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I haven't an answer for that question, but however, I'll certainly get one and respond to the honourable member.
Member Halifax Shabakto on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll inform the Minister and the members of this House that other jurisdictions have had such guidelines in place for several years to ensure that all contractors exercise fair and equitable hiring practices and that the doors are opened to businesses owned and operated by members of equity-seeking groups. My final question will actually be to the Premier. When will the Premier demonstrate leadership in this area and put forward affirmative action regulations for the provincial tendering process?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the Minister for Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the question asked by the member opposite, first of all, I want to point out that the project that he was speaking about was actually tendered by Halifax Regional Municipality, and that on that project there were several local subcontractors from the area, including electrical contractors, trucking contractors, labourers, as well as security guards. And Mr. Speaker, a black-owned business provided the subflooring contract. But Mr. Speaker, with respect to the question that he answered, it's part of our work plan with the Office of African Nova Scotian Affairs, and we will be bringing forward in the near future a recommendation to government with respect to that.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, this could be one of the last questions this session from the only official opposition party in this House. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. As the Minister is aware, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education recently announced a process to develop a funding formula for school boards. And this process will involve school boards and public education partners, and it will ensure that a formula is developed that is fair, transparent, and meets the unique needs of communities. So my question for the Minister, Mr. Speaker, is could the Minister of Health update us then as to the status of a funding formula for district health authorities?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much.
You increase it 7% a year.
Yes.
Order, please. Honourable Minister of Health.
I've been getting some help here, Mr. Speaker, and it's been suggested that we have increased the formula by 7% per annum, but that's not the real question the honourable member asked. And Mr. Speaker, I can say that the question of a funding formula is something that we have discussed with the district health authorities as I have met with them, and we're quite interested in the initiative taken by the Minister of Education with respect to school boards, and we will be following that very closely as well as carrying on discussions with the DHAs.
Now, Member for Glace Bay, in your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government promised district health authorities in a press release in February of 2002 that their equitable funding formula was in the works, and they reinforced that as a priority in their business plan in 2002, and then we heard absolutely nothing. So let me ask the Minister, Mr. Speaker, could the Minister please explain why his department has been silent since 2002 with regard to the development of a funding formula for DHAs?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and we have been far from silent. Some of the things that we have done, the honourable member doesn't want to hear, but we did in fact establish 7% funding, guaranteed funding to the DHAs. That's the first step that we took in order to ensure that there's fair and equitable funding for the DHAs. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we have been involved with value for money assessments with 2 of the DHAs. There's been the Corporate Sanchez report for the Capital District. That, Mr. Speaker, is providing us with very useful information as we move forward with respect to the issue of fair and equitable funding.
Order, please. The Member for Glace Bay in his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the minister would agree that a funding formula would recognize the distinct needs and challenges that are currently being experienced by some of the district health authorities. And the recent value for money assessment done for Colchester and Pictou County DHAs also recommended that there be a funding formula. So my final question for the minister is, could the minister please explain when he will finally get around to beginning that process for the development of District Health Authority funding formula?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I've indicated in my answer to the previous supplementary question, the process is underway. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very hopeful that we will, in fact, deal with that far sooner than we'll likely get the Prime Minister's answer to our request for fair and equitable funding formula for the provinces of Canada with respect to health care. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a good question, and we're working toward.
Young member for Cape Breton Nova.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I guess they're wrong in both occasions there. It's not the last question, and we are the official opposition. I applaud the increase. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Health Promotion. Mr. Speaker, I applaud the increased access to nicotine replacement for low-income families, Mr. Speaker. But why more attention is being paid to strengthening and enforcing the Smoke-Free Places Act? My question to the Minister of Health Promotion is, why isn't stronger smoke-free places legislation and resources for enforcement a part of your strategy?
Order, please. The Honourable Minister responsible for Health Promotion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, they're both wrong, and that's why they're on that side of the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll take the opportunity to answer the member's question. I believe it's still time. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the inspections happening, they are happening across the province, Mr. Speaker. We have inspectors, a number of inspectors. I believe it's close to 80, the number in total. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do those inspections, provide the appropriate warnings, as well as take the appropriate measures, Mr. Speaker, when required.
Young member for Cape Breton Nova, and your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, with no designated tobacco inspectors for
Order, please. Order, please. Young member for Cape Breton Nova has the floor and his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With no designated tobacco inspectors for this act, small wonder. My question to the minister is, will he back up the Smoke-Free Places Act with inspectors and vigorous advertisement of the toll-free complaint line?
Honourable Minister of Health Promotions have about 15 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, the member is wrong. There are inspectors with respect to looking at this issue. We have, I believe the total number is in the 70, 78, Mr. Speaker, in total. But I'll provide the member with that information.
Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
You're on.
Mr. Speaker, would you, I move that you now leave the chair and the House resolve in the committee of the whole House on bills.
Is it agreed? Carried.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chair, would you please call Bill number 58, the Mechanics Lien Act?
Bill number 58, the Mechanics Lien Act. Order, please. Order. Order. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted a few minutes to speak on title with regard to the Mechanics Lien Act. This is I guess actually it's probably going to be called the Builders Lien Act. I'm not even sure if that technically is now the title, given the fact that we amended the bill in law amendments to reflect the fact that historically this was always known as a bill with regard to mechanics, but in the recent past, obviously, it's been one that's been predominantly used by the construction industry with regard to liens that will be put against other companies, subcontractors, and others for purposes of payment. And Mr. Chair, it's a bill that's long overdue in needing changes. It's a bill that, it's an act that has not seen any significant changes for years. And I do want to make a note of a couple of people who have actually had an influence in ensuring that this piece of legislation came forward. I want to particularly note the Law Reform Commission of Nova Scotia. They did a wonderful job in producing a report that most people would say was balanced and reflective of the need for change in this legislation. And not to be too diskind to the government on this, but to say that it was only a few years ago they were talking about disbanding the Law Reform Commission or removing funding from the Law Reform Commission, and to see that this kind of legislation, good, solid public policy, good changes with regard to legislation in this province is being brought forward by the Law Reform Commission. I think that's a good thing, and I think it's something that we should all be appreciative of in the role that they play for the minimum amount of money that they actually receive, both from the government and from the Law Foundation and other sources. I'd also like to note that the fact that our leader, the leader of the opposition, the member for Cole Harbour, has been pushing this issue, I think, since he first got elected in 1998. As a man who had dealt a lot with small businesses, as a general practitioner in downtown Dartmouth with his law firm, he saw on a daily basis the impact that the old law had on those that were in the industry. Small businesses that had very short margins, did not have a lot of cash flow, were impacted by the legislation as it was then written, Mr. Chair. And I know that the leader of our party has done a lot of work in trying to push this issue, both here in the House and behind the scenes, to ensure that we were able to bring something forward. I'm glad to see it was brought forward. I know we heard from the construction industry, we heard from the trades at the Law Amendments Committee. A lot of the work they did, Mr. Chair, I think a lot of influence they had on this legislation.